There is one game that I always wanted to analyze, and that game is World Racing 2. That's a sequel, so it felt disingenuous to not play the original first. The original game is close to 20 years now. It will become 20 years old in 2 months. In this video, we are analyzing Mercedes-Benz World Racing, or World Racing 1, and seeing how well the game holds up after 20 years, or 20 years later. Hi everyone, as always Patrick here. If you're already subscribed, make sure you turn on notifications, otherwise YouTube won't tell you if I posted anything. If you are new to the channel, make sure you watch until the very end and consider subscribing if you like it. Okay, Mercedes-Benz World Racing or World Racing 1. Mercedes-Benz World Racing, or simply World Racing 1, was developed by Cinetic and published by TDK Mediactive or Mediactive in September 2003. You know the deal, it's time to analyze the graphics. Obviously a 20-year-old game isn't going to look very good nowadays, and it definitely cannot be compared to modern games or games that came out in 2023 at the time of me recording this video. But I would argue that World Racing 1, despite the fact that the game is 20 years old, graphically it still holds up pretty well. And I would argue, and I know that a lot of people will disagree with me on this, but I would argue that Mercedes-Benz World Racing is the best looking racing game of 2003, and no other racing game looked better than Mercedes-Benz World Racing at that time. To prove my point, let's compare this game to other racing games that also came out in 2003. Mini Racing Online, Rallycross, the PC port of Colin McRae Rally 3, Live for Speed, Ford Racing 2, V-Rally 3, and Chase HQ 2 Evolution. And I know what you're going to say. There was also Need for Speed Underground in 2003, and yes, there was. But Need for Speed Underground made 2 mistakes. One of them is the fact that you race in a city, and only in a city, which means there is only one environment and there's no variety in the environment. And in Underground you always raced at night time without different weather conditions. No daytime, no rain, no snow, nothing. Meanwhile, Mercedes-Benz World Racing never had this problem. World Racing has so much variety when it comes to the environments and weather conditions. In this game, you race in places like Area 51, Japan, Mexico, and many more. And since I've mentioned weather conditions and the time of day, I have to briefly talk about those things. You can race at any time of day in this game, that's pretty self-explanatory. As for the weather conditions, there are only 3 basic weather conditions, but that's still more than what Need for Speed Underground has. You can race in the kind of weather that's just fine and dry, you can race while it's raining, and you can race while it's snowing. But if there's one thing that I absolutely love about the graphics of World Racing 1, it's the texture work. The textures in this game have this effect that I personally like to call the GTA effect. What does this mean? It means that the textures look good from afar but bad up close. And I might be in the minority here, but I actually really like this. But okay, I've talked about the graphics for 5 minutes now, so it's time to talk about the graphical options the game gives you. The game does support widescreen resolutions, but that support is limited at best. Widescreen can be selected in the launcher, but aspect ratio is limited to 16:9. But what do I mean by saying that the support is limited? Well, this game has this quirk that I like to call the higher the resolution, the smaller the HUD. For example, if you play this game in 4K, yes, the game does support 4K, the HUD is incredibly small. It's actually unreadable because it's so small. You actually need a magnifying glass to see where's the HUD and what's on the HUD. That's crazy, but what about other graphical options? Well, there's anisotropic filtering, dynamic or full. There's anti-aliasing up to 4 times. There's VSync if you really need it. And there's also no frame rate cap, which means that your gameplay is going to be very smooth. That's cool, but there are 2 problems with the graphical options. The first one is with the VSync. Yes, the game has VSync and it does work as intended, but it's labeled in such a weird way. VSync is labeled in the launcher as presentation interval. And how do you set this up? Interval immediate is VSync off and interval 1 is VSync on. Why couldn't you just call this option VSync in the launcher? I have no idea. And I'm guessing that's a mystery that we will never get the answer to. But there is a bigger problem. There's no FOV slider. And now that I've mentioned those 2 problems, I have to ask. The game is easily moddable and the modding community is still active. So if there's any chance that any modder for this game is watching this video, can you please tell me how to fix those issues? The labeling of the VSync and how to change the FOV? Please let me know if any modder is watching this, of course. Last but not least, the game stability. The game didn't crash a single time, it didn't stutter, I didn't get any frame rate drops. Everything works as intended in this game. So the PC release 20 years later is good, but definitely lacking because it's 20 years old. Since I've talked about the graphics for 9 minutes now, I'm going to stop talking about the graphics, and now I am going to talk about the story in 1 minute. You know what I'm going to say. The game doesn't have a story, I'm okay with this. You don't need a good story in a racing game or a story in a racing game in general for the game to be good, yada yada yada. Let's talk about the gameplay. In this section I will talk about the damage model, the physics, the handling, the cars and the tracks. After that I will talk about the bad qualities of the game and we will be good to go. Let's start with the damage model, since it's the easiest thing to talk about in this game. The damage model in this game is pretty disappointing. Just like that crash you've just seen, but that's besides the point. Cars in this game are resistant to damage, and the damage doesn't really affect the handling, which I'll talk about later. I mean, sure, the cars do get dents when they crash, and there is some sort of deformation, but it's mostly visual, basic, and cheap looking. Mostly. Yes, if the car has more than 50% of damage, the cars do struggle with accelerating, but that's pretty much it. That's all I have to say about the damage model. Let's move on and let's talk about the physics. The physics in this game are good, but they are also incredibly dated. I mean, the game is 20 years old after all. There's one important thing to note here. The cars have a lot of downforce and they are pretty much planted to the ground. When you accidentally drive off a cliff, the car will stick to that cliff. Most of the time. There are times where your car will be in the air for like 1 second and then stick to the ground, so that way you can quickly get back up. It's a little bit strange to me, but I quickly got used to this. Other than that, the physics work as intended. Nothing special to note here. You know, at times like this, I really wish I could explain things like this in a better way, but sadly I can't. Oh well, let's talk about the handling. How's the handling in this game? It depends on your settings. You don't get a lot of options to play around with in this game, but the options you do get greatly affect the handling in this game. There are 3 main options you can customize. The first option is the fact that you can turn on or off ABS. It's pretty much self-explanatory. If you have played any racing game, you know what it is. Let's move on to option number 2. Option number 2 is turning on or off ASR. I gotta be honest, I don't know what that is and I don't know what it does. Option number 3 is the most important option. For this option, you get a slider. This slider determines what kind of handling you want to have. You can have an arcade handling, you can have the sim handling, or you can have the simcade handling. On top of that, you can choose how strong that handling style is. For example, do you want to go for the full arcade experience? You can do that. Do you want to go for the simcade experience? You can do that. Do you want to play this game like you're playing a sim? You can do that. Do you want to go somewhere in between, as in half sim, half simcade? You can do that. Half simcade, half arcade? You can do that. The choice is yours. I was playing on full simulation mode with all assists turned off, and I still felt like the game was generous to me with its handling. Sure, I had a hard time controlling the car, but I still had a lot of fun driving. So how does this slider affect the handling? For example, if you set the slider to full arcade or 100% arcade as the game shows it, the cars become grippy and easy to control. If you set the slider to 100% simulation, the cars aren't grippy, instead they are slidey, twitchy and hard to control. The cars also have a lot of understeer on 100% simulation. Regardless, I still have a lot of fun driving in this game no matter which type of handling I'm using. There is no definitive way to summarize the handling. The best way to summarize the handling is to play around with the slider and all these other options and find a setting that suits your driving style the best. There is one more thing I have to talk about when it comes to the handling: the weather conditions. When you're racing in a sunny weather, everything is fine, but when you are racing in the rain or when it's snowing, well, your car becomes extremely slippery and slidey. And I think that covers everything that needs to be said about the handling. Now I can finally talk about the tracks and cars. I will start with the tracks first. As you would expect from a game called World Racing, you are racing around the world, or some parts of the world. There are so many maps in this game, and because of that, there are so many tracks in this game. You are racing in many great places. For example, Area 51, Japan, Mexico, Alps, and the list goes on. The maps have this design style that I like to call the Expand Rally style. And this game came out 1 year before Expand Rally. AKA you have those huge and expansive maps that have lots and lots of kilometers of roads. I love this style since that way you can create hundreds of tracks on just one map. And there are a lot of maps in this game. Too bad the track design isn't on the same level as Expand Rally though. The track design in this game kinda feels like the track design seen in Expand Rally Extreme. The track design in this game feels pretty repetitive, and Expand Rally Extreme has a lot of repetitive tracks. Not only that, but the tracks in Mercedes-Benz World Racing feel fake. It feels like they don't exist at all. I swear even Expand Rally Extreme did a better job with this. And Expand Rally Extreme is an extremely repetitive game. Are the tracks in Mercedes-Benz World Racing still fun to drive around on? You bet. I think that's all you need to know about the tracks in this game, so let's talk about the cars. As you would expect from a game called Mercedes-Benz World Racing, there is only one car brand you can use, and that car brand is of course Mercedes-Benz. Despite the fact that the game has only one car brand, there are about 150 cars to choose from. There are so many car classes to choose from. You can use normal cars, sports cars, old cars, and the list goes on. There's even a historical Formula 1 car. All of those cars handle differently. Every car has different stats. There are 3 stats: handling, top speed, and acceleration. The most important ones in this game are top speed and acceleration. Handling really doesn't change anything. The most important stats in this game are top speed and acceleration. I think acceleration is more important than top speed, because if you have good acceleration, you can pass every single opponent and win the race as long as you don't make any mistakes. Top speed is also important because once you reach a certain speed, you can keep it for a lot longer. Because of this, there's a lot of handling variety. Some cars feel really good to drive, meanwhile some cars are quite tricky to handle with a boatload of oversteer with the power on, but possibly overly easy to drift, though that's not a good way to drive in this game. Now combine the damage model, physics, the handling, the tracks, the maps and the cars, and you get a good game. But even a good game has bad qualities. Yeah, we have to talk about the bad qualities now, because this game is overambitious and rough around the edges. For starters, just a second ago I have mentioned that the game is overambitious. You can tell that Cinetic wanted to make this huge and expansive game with so many maps, so many cars and great handling and stuff. But I still feel like something's missing though. Okay, I just got it. I know what's missing. Good sound design. Now I will say this, the soundtrack is very good with a lot of good trance style of music, but the sound design on the other hand is bad. More specifically, the cars have bad sound design. Every single car sounds like a modified lawnmower. It's not pleasant to listen to. Or is it it's not pleasant to my ears? Whatever, you get the point. Another problem is the AI. It's not very smart, let's put it that way. Now, because I was mostly in first place, so I couldn't really see how the AI behaves, there is one thing I managed to capture though, but I'm not sure if I'm going to show it in the video. It depends on how I will edit this video. Every time the AI opponents tried to overtake me, I was able to cheese them by simply getting in front of them, and they hit the brake so hard that they actually stopped. And this happened every single time I did this. It's good for cheesing the game, but it's not good for showing how good your AI is. However, there's one more problem that I have to address right now. The adaptive difficulty, or as the game calls it, dynamic difficulty. Yeah, the game came out around the time where adaptive difficulty was this huge innovative thing and every single game wanted to use it. This system hurts the game, in my opinion. So here's how this works. You have a slider that's pretty much locked because the dynamic difficulty is on by default. You can turn this off, which fixes the problem, so I definitely recommend doing it. But I did actually use that dynamic difficulty for a while, so I have to talk about it. You start off with the AI being locked at 70%, and it works like this. The more races you win, the harder the game becomes, with the AI more specifically. The more races you lose, the weaker the AI becomes. As you would expect, I was trying to win every single event. As you can see by my footage, I didn't manage to do this every single time, but I got first place in most events. And so what's the problem? I guess I was winning too many races, because after a while or should I say after like 2 or 3 races, the AI difficulty increased to 100%, which is the maximum. And when it happened, the game was unplayable. I just couldn't do anything. And it was at that point I had turned the dynamic difficulty off, which helped, but this system causes a lot of problems, especially with the difficulty. Why is this a problem? You see, the part of the game's appeal is to master every track, master every car, and show the game that you're the boss. But if you're artificially going to increase the difficulty, this just takes away the power fantasy part of the game. That's not good. Mercedes-Benz World Racing was pretty much the guinea pig for this feature, and I have to ask, do you know what games nowadays don't use this adaptive difficulty? Because it's stupid. I can't think of a single racing game that did this whole adaptive difficulty thing correctly. I could rant about this forever, but the video is too long, plus I can't think of any more bad qualities to talk about, so I guess I'll just end the video there, right after these few sentences. In conclusion, Mercedes-Benz World Racing, or World Racing 1, is a very ambitious game that is also rough around the edges. I did enjoy my time with the game, so I guess you can go ahead and play it. So yeah, go and buy it. That's what I would have said if the game was available on any digital stores. Yes, this game is an abandonware and you can't buy it on any digital stores. Thankfully, the game is available on websites like myabandonware.com, so I guess you can download it from there. Not sponsored, by the way. But the most important thing here is that you can still get the game, well, from that website at least, and still enjoy it. The game is good, not great, but it isn't bad. And I think that's what the game deserves. Thankfully, actually not thankfully, I should say that the game also got a sequel, World Racing 2. And speaking of World Racing 2, that's what I'm going to analyze in my next video, so stay tuned. Also, you know, all the usual stuff, like the video, comment, subscribe, it really helps. Yeah, stay tuned, because next up is World Racing 2. But that pretty much sums up everything I wanted to say in this analysis video. Thank you for watching, and I'll see you next time.
Just